The latest Spanish thriller series, Reina Roja, Red Queen, has finally premiered. The plot revolves around the son of a wealthy magnate whose life is gruesomely ended by a murderer, leaving half of his head severed and displayed on the living room sofa. Strangely, the victim's skin is coated with big lard, adding an eerie touch to the crimey scene. Despite the authorities' diligent efforts, no traces of the killer can be found. In desperation, they turn to a brilliant teenage genius with an IQ of 242, Antonia. Formerly a renowned crime scene analyst, Antonia is known for her meticulous approach in unraveling the intricacies of criminal scenes. Analyzing the remnants of the skull fragments on the table, she deduces that the victim was immersed in liquid nitrogen before death, explaining the remarkably smooth cut of the head. During the investigation, a green-headed fly unexpectedly flies from the corpse's left hand. Antonia instructs the forensic experts to lower the room's temperature to the minimum, as the presence of green-headed flies indicates a post-mortem period of at least 48 hours. They must find clues before the body decomposes. In Antonia's deductive process, she discovers a small needle hole on the right side of the victim's neck, suggesting that the killer drained the blood from the body. Surprisingly, there are no apparent external wounds or defensive injuries on the limbs and face of the deceased, indicating that the victim was dismembered after death. Antonia concludes that the killer first used a syringe to insert into the victim's carotid artery, gradually draining the blood in a prolonged and excruciating process. Strangely, despite the gruesome nature of the death, there are no signs of struggle at the crime scene, contradicting the expected agony the victim should have experienced according to the usual pattern of such cases. At this moment, the forensic expert on the side mentions that traces of aconitine, a toxin used in bucket arrows, were found inside the victim's body. When used in reasonable amounts, this poison can prevent muscle contraction, inducing a state of anesthesia in the body. This explains why the victim died without any signs of struggle. The forensic expert reminds Antonia that another unidentified compound is present on the victim's body, and they must wait for the results of further analysis before proceeding with the next steps of the investigation. While awaiting the test results, Officer John expresses his long-standing doubts to the police chief. He cannot comprehend why they are specifically investigating cases involving wealthy individuals, and the local police seem unaware of these occurrences. Could there be some unspeakable secret involved? The police chief advises John to be smarter and not ask too many questions about things he shouldn't. Simultaneously, Antonia receives the test report on the victim. However, when she reaches the last page, she becomes suddenly horrified. Realizing the gravity of the situation, she swiftly returns to the crime scene, preparing to conduct another thorough analysis of the body. The police chief is puzzled, and Antonia explains that the report indicates the victim died 48 hours ago. This implies that the killer first kidnapped the victim to another location for the murder, then bypassed the tight security checks to bring the body to the villa. It is an intricately planned homicide, unlike anything Antonia has encountered before. She suggests the police chief gather all officers to search the surroundings, as the killer may strike again. However, John disagrees, believing the killer wouldn't be foolish enough to commit multiple crimes to attract the attention of the police. Unbeknownst to them, as they engage in this conversation, the killer indeed follows Antonia's expectations and proceeds to kidnap the next target. The woman is the sole heir to Spain's wealthiest individual, and at this moment she remains unaware of the impending danger. Passing through a highway intersection, the driver notices road construction ahead, temporarily blocking the route. Following the directions on warning signs, he takes a detour down a narrow path. After a short while, the driver, using his phone's navigation, realizes they seem to have entered a dead end. He instructs the woman to stay in the car while he investigates the road conditions. Unbeknownst to them, the killer has been lurking in the shadows, anticipating their arrival. The driver notices a forestry worker ahead, wearing reflective clothing, and approaches to ask for directions to the city center. The killer pretends to point to a nearby road, and taking advantage of the driver turning away, swiftly chokes him to death. The alarmed woman quickly locks the car doors to prevent the killer from entering. Terrified, she looks outside, unsure of what to do. Seeing the killer heading towards a nearby container, the woman continuously honks the horn, hoping to attract attention in the remote mountainous area. However, with no one around in the deep woods at night, her attempts seem futile. Desperate, she takes out her phone to dial the emergency number, but at that moment, the killer raises a fire extinguisher and smashes the window. In this critical situation, the woman seizes the extinguisher and presses the button, releasing a cloud of powder onto the man's face. While he writhes in pain on the ground, the woman opens the car door and runs out, discarding her high heels. She hides under a large tree, holding her breath as the killer calmly searches the area. Just as they are about to get closer, the woman accidentally hears a series of dog barks nearby, indicating the presence of inhabited surroundings. Believing someone must be nearby, she quickly runs in the direction of the sound. The woman continues to scream for help, but eventually, the man injects her with a tranquilizer, causing her to lose consciousness. When she wakes up again, she finds herself imprisoned in a secret room, her long hair cut off by the perpetrator. On the next day, the wealthy father, who is traveling on a private plane, receives a call from his daughter. A man's voice is heard.
Carla, ¿me oyes?
Le oigo perfectamente.
Revealing that the daughter is in his hands. The man discloses a unique beauty mark on her inner calf, making the wealthy father anxious. Confirming that his daughter has indeed been kidnapped, he threatens the man, warning that any harm to his daughter will lead to severe consequences. The wealthy father demands to know the kidnapper's intentions, stating his abundance of wealth. However, the man on the phone claims he wants nothing and only aims to make the father experience loss. He abruptly hangs up. Desperate to save his kidnapped daughter Kara, the wealthy father contacts crime scene analyst Antonia. He offers a reward of 1 million euros if they can solve the case within 24 hours. Antonia, indifferent to money, inquires about any information the kidnapper might have revealed during the call.
¿Qué es lo que quiere el secuestrador?
The kidnapper identified himself as Ezekiel, though they suspect it might be a false name. Besides that, no other information was given. Unable to extract more details, Antonia resorts to tracking the last known location of Kara's missing phone. They arrive at the yard where the kidnapping occurred, and the bloodstains on the ground confirm their suspicions. Climbing up a wooden structure in the corner, Antonia conducts an analysis of the surrounding environment. Concluding that the kidnapper had only one escape route, they drive towards the indicated direction. However, the kidnapper is already at the scene, intending to destroy the evidence. Shortly after, Antonia, accompanied by Officer Mark, arrives near the destination. On the roadside, they come across a decomposed yellow horse, startling both of them. However, at that moment, the sudden roar of an engine is heard from nearby. A red sports car emerges, heading straight towards them. Fortunately, Mark swiftly grabs Antonia, saving their lives. The driver of the red car is none other than the kidnapper from the previous night. Without hesitation, they quickly pursue the car. As they reach a highway section, Antonia suddenly notices numerous black monkeys appearing on the car's windshield. These hallucinations are a result of his high intelligence often being plagued by mental illnesses. In this critical moment, Mark hands him a calming pill. With restored consciousness, Antonia presses the gas pedal, catching up with the red car. Mark takes out his phone and captures a photo of Ezekiel, but due to the high speed, the image is blurry. Suddenly, Ezekiel raises a gun and aims it directly at them, pulling the trigger. Antonia and Mark lose control and are thrown out of the car. Despite narrowly escaping the murderer, they manage to capture a photo of him in the process. Returning to the police station at night, Mark transfers the daytime photos onto the computer. However, due to their extreme blurriness, they can't make out the details. Fortunately, the technical team can enhance the photos, and under the woman's guidance, an image with a snake-shaped tattoo emerges. Antonia sees this as a potential breakthrough, suggesting they send the photo to all tattoo shops to gather information about the perpetrator. When leaving the police station, Mark drops Antonia off in a white taxi, and they plan to investigate tattoo shops early the next morning. However, as the taxi drives away, Mark suddenly feels like he has seen the driver somewhere before. Through the rearview mirror, Antonia notices that the driver is the same person they apprehended during the day, Ezekiel. He attempts to escape by opening the car door but ends up being injected with a tranquilizer by Ezekiel, losing consciousness. When Antonia wakes up again, he finds himself lying on a mattress. Surprisingly, Ezekiel hasn't harmed him. Instead, he takes him to a church covered in complaint letters. These letters detail news about wealthy individuals exploiting employees illegally. Moreover, the previous 2 kidnapping cases involved children of these affluent individuals. Could it be that Ezekiel seeks revenge through these acts? Shortly after, Mark uses Antonia's phone's location and locates them. Even if Ezekiel has grievances, he shouldn't target innocent children. They must apprehend him before the next victim falls. Approaching a nearby tattoo shop, Antonia hands the photo of the snake-shaped tattoo to the receptionist. She immediately recognizes it as her father's work, asserting that she wouldn't make a mistake. To convince them, she presents a tattoo album, revealing similar snake tattoos. Unfortunately, her father suffered a stroke 6 months ago and can no longer speak. In the midst of their confusion, the high-intelligence Antonia devises a clever plan. He lifts the tattoo album and presents it to the man, inducing him to answer through blinking. Eventually, he deciphers the words "underground police." It turns out that Ezekiel's true identity is that of an undercover police officer. However, the reason behind him kidnapping children remains unknown to both Antonia and Mark. Through an investigation of the police system, Antonia identifies 5 undercover police officers. 2 of them have already passed away, one in an explosion and the other due to cancer. The remaining individual is likely Ezekiel. As they reach the target location, they cautiously enter, encountering traps set by the homeowner. It appears that Ezekiel was well prepared for their arrival. Upon reaching the innermost room, Mark discovers a large golden retriever lying on the floor. Suddenly, a man with a cane rushes out, and a struggle ensues. Just as Mark is about to fatally strike the man, Antonia intervenes. It turns out the man is not the taxi driver who kidnapped him the previous day. After clearing up the misunderstanding, the man explains that he is indeed an undercover police officer who retired 2 years ago after losing his eyesight in an operation. The snake tattoo is their exclusive mark. However, what perplexes Antonia is that, among the 5 officers, only this man remains. So who exactly is Ezekiel? The man reveals to Antonia and Mark the existence of a teammate named Fajardo. Fajardo's daughter tragically died 5 years ago, leading him to develop a mental illness. However, 2 years before, he suddenly recovered, was discharged from the hospital, and took part in a dangerous mission. Unfortunately, Fajardo encountered an explosion and was presumed dead. Oddly, they never found his body in the wreckage, and Fajardo disappeared without a trace. As the man recounts the story, Antonia and Mark suddenly realize that Ezekiel is none other than the missing Fajardo. They promptly report this information to their superiors. Strangely, the higher-ups are not surprised and claim to have already identified the target. They explain that they obtained Fajardo's direction from the taxi's steering wheel. Anthony becomes increasingly suspicious. How could an experienced undercover police officer like Fajardo expose his fingerprints to the police? Something seems amiss. The 2 revisit the gas station where they found the taxi, rechecking the surveillance footage. Mark notices something unusual immediately. The person in the video is a woman with long hair, and the vehicle was fueled with gasoline, while the current position of the vehicle is at a diesel pump. It's evident that the person deliberately exposed themselves to surveillance. Antonia speculates that Fajardo's daughter may still be alive, and the father-daughter duo seems to be intentionally luring the authorities. Simultaneously, heavily armed police, believing they are raiding Fajardo's residence, fall into a trap. Unbeknownst to them, cameras capture their every move. When the target enters the explosion range, Fajardo's daughter triggers a timed bomb, causing a deadly explosion.